Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. A lot of people have described it as a book that they could not read at night because it was too scary. It's a classic, like, kind of isolated house style story, and I love a haunted house. I think based off of this description, it's not the house that's haunted, but like creepy things happening while you're alone in the house and for whatever reasons you can't leave is totally my jam. The Nightmare Room. This one is definitely a personal haunting, even though it features a house. And I haven't read too much about it because I didn't want to be spoiled, but I am down for some haunted house fiction. And I found a couple that seem to have really high reviews. Devil's Night, The Haunting of Eden, which is a Penny Wright book 1 by A.N. Willis. It's a whole haunted ghost town and a gifted medium. So this is great. I know it's like really tropey to go back to like the house built on the cemetery or whatever. If it makes for some good spooky times, it makes for some good spooky time. And I just want to be spooked a little bit. Next is The Haunting of Mackenzie Blake, a riveting haunted house mystery. Book number 41 in a series by Hazel Holmes. I think each one of these books is a standalone, which is why I'm looking at number 41. It's a town right outside of New Orleans, and it's a long abandoned Victorian style home. So I'm really hoping for like some of that Louisiana flair that you might see in like an Interview with a Vampire, or like I saw in Carrie Lake's Sin and Shadow. And I'm looking for like some spooky ghosts and like a compelling backstory with like some tragic classic horror elements in it. It is entirely possible that I'm gonna find that it's not very good. It's got one of those covers that makes you think twice about picking it up. I do read a lot of haunted house fiction, and it almost never makes it onto this channel because it's almost always bad. This is a just personal pick, so I have a feeling it's also not good. But sometimes even like a not good haunted house is a lot of fun because you just like are just in the moment and rolling with it. And you're like, all right, this is ridiculous and crazy, and I'm just reading it and going with it. So next on the list is going to be Peak by Stella Williams. This is a short story. It's only 28 pages. Peak specifically is on my TBR because Stella Williams as an author has been recommended to me, and this is the story she has that's on Kindle Unlimited. But it's actually a pretty interesting sounding story. Thumbs up. I love a cabin in the woods mountain story. And the camp is called Camp Eldridge. So I love that because, you know, the Eldridge horrors is a known trope. So I'm just excited for mayhem to break out in this 28 pages and to see if our characters make it or not. And if they don't, just to see exactly how horribly they die. I feel like 28 pages is enough to give me something like interesting and unique, but not so many pages that I'm going to be really sad when these characters die. I also have Woom by Duncan Ralston on the list, and this I love the cover of. Woom is like actually a neon sign over like, it looks like either a dilapidated motel or a dilapidated like gas station, except there's no gas pumps out in front. And then the opening line of the summary is, I believe pain lingers, Angel said. Do I believe in spirits? In the supernatural? Probably not. Oh, I love it. I love when we're going to a place that has a story. If it's haunted or if there are ghosts, great. But the best part about the haunted house is the history that's happened in there that supposedly made the house haunted. Next is Hell Train, The Cursed Manuscripts by Ian Rob White. It looks like this is probably like a historical horror story. I like the idea of something horrible happening on a train because once you're on the train, it's started going. There's not a lot of places for you to go. Like if it's a haunting or a killer or whatever, you can keep going from car to car, but you can't really leave the train, and like these confined spaces that you cannot leave. You know, if you're in a haunted house, you yell at the characters to leave or to sell their house or whatever the deal is. But if you're on a train, are you supposed to jump off the train? There's that trapped element in trains, and then there's also the danger that the thing you're trapped in can also be used as a collision weapon. Next is going to be Hannah Beast, The Dark Corners collection by Jennifer McCohen. Bad events happened in Halloween many years ago. This one girl who was getting bullied meets her death in a scavenger hunt gone wrong, and then her wrath comes upon the whole town. Everything about that sounds like a win. Next is Creature of the Night by Charles Ray and Jerry Underhill. So there's a lot of buildup in the summary, but the long and short of it is it looks like it might be like a werewolf horror story, and I'd love to go back to that werewolf horror story route. As much as I like a fated mate story or a romance story or even just like a social fun adventure story with werewolves, I love that classic horror, both the body horror that happens for the werewolf transformation and like just the kind of brutality that a lupine animal with a human mind is able to extract on enemies. Now, it's possible that this is like a red herring mystery situation. It's not really a werewolf thriller, but I would be okay with that too. Next is going to be First Hunt by A. Lopez Jr. Honestly, looking at the cover of this book, it looks like an Evil Dead knockoff. We've got like a family hunting trip, an unseen evil, and weekend camping trip gone horribly wrong. Just being trapped in the woods with some kind of horror is really scary. And I think a hunting trip is a great setup for it. You've got like the family there with all their resentments and suspicions and stereotypes already built in and baked into the relationships. And because it's a hunting trip specifically, you know, there's guns, there's weapons, there's maybe a bear trap or something equally gruesome. It just seems like a story that could be perfect for like that possession trope, or like the trope where you like enter the zone of the woods and you can't get back out. And I'm really curious to see where they go with it. Next is going to be The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. So Carlton Meltick III described this book as the last final girl is like Quentin Tarantino's take on Cabin in the Woods, bloody, absurd, and smart. I really had a fun time watching Cabin in the Woods. I enjoy that as like one of my fun classic horror continual return to movies. And I like the trope, like that final last girl. She meets these criteria. Sometimes she lives, sometimes she doesn't. And I really loved Stephen Graham Jones in the Trespass collection. His characterization of Millie and the way he took like the alien pod people story and made it warm and comforting makes me kind of want to see how he would subvert this last final girl. Camp Firewood by Borris. Bacic. This is another one of those classic camp horror stories. It's got the kids out in the woods, away from like their parents and adults that they trust, with like these shifty or potentially friendly guardians that they're just not as familiar with. The tagline here is, if the counselors of Camp Firewood send you into the woods, you're as good as dead. That sounds like fun. It sounds really goosebumpy. It is a little bit longer at 447 pages. So, I mean, it will depend when I get into it. Next is going to be The Winterset Hollow, a novel by Jonathan Duram. This one was definitely recommended to me by a booktuber. I am not sure who. I like this because it sounds really topsy-turvy and there's like some strong horror elements sprinkled throughout. Splatterfest by Robbie Dorman, a film festival or like a horror convention thing, and each year they're trying to outdo themselves. This year they're planning to have it take place on the Comman compound, which is the site of In This World Occult Massacre. So it's interesting, number one, that they got clearance for that, but obviously some kind of shenanigans are going to ensue, and it's going to be hard to tell what is just part of the convention / part of the film festival versus what's actually killers coming through and destroying the people who are there. Parasyte Volume 1 by Iwaaki Hitoshi, and this one I know is from Tamika at Tamika's library. This one is like part body horror, part horror humor, and like alien invasion kind of stuff. These are aliens who like take over your body, and in this case, the alien was only able to take over this guy's hand and not his whole body. And hilarity as well as rough times ensue. Next is going to be The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. This one's been on my list for a while. It's a fictionalized version of a true story. I've seen the movie. It was awful to watch the movie. The account is heartbreaking, and it's made even more chilling and heartbreaking to know that it really happened. But it's just one of those situations where once you know that this is a thing that happened in history, first you go look up the actual history, then you're looking at the trials, then you're looking at that movie with new eyes based off of that information. It's almost like you feel obligated to consume all of the content that's related to it. The reason it's sitting on my TBR now in electronic version is because this book has come up on Kindle Unlimited, so there's no time like now, I guess, to read it. I'm not quite in a headspace where I can manage it. I know exactly what I'm in for, and I'm not there yet. Next is going to be A Song for the End by Kit Power. This is a story about like an indie band whose latest song kind of goes viral, and the band is excited and celebrating, but they're also noticing a correlation, like people who hear the song die, or they're trying to get ahead of this blood trail that their song is causing. It's only 125 pages. I also like the idea that the music is really powerful. It's got like this force we don't understand, and there are unintended consequences to listening to the song. And that is finally going to be all of the books that are on my TBR. I want to thank you guys if you've watched one of these videos or all of these videos. I really appreciate your time. Have you read any of the books I've mentioned? Let me know in those comments down below. Maybe help me figure out which one of these books I should move to next. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep reading. Bye!